Welcome to How to Make Films and Influence People.
Hey everybody, and welcome to How to Make Films and Influence People with Peter and Andrew, where we talk about our own approach to screenwriting and filmmaking, discuss great works of cinema, and blasphemously imagine how they could be remade. This week we'll be talking about Mulholland Drive, giving an update on our professional pursuits, talking about what we've been watching, and connecting with you, the audience. First of all, I'm Peter, successful filmmaker, film professor, and screenwriter. This is Andrew.
Filmmaker, screenwriter, but not a movie star by choice.
Oh, you made that choice. They were knocking down the door, but you were like, nope.
Yeah, I just decided you have to, it can get kind of tricky sometimes.
Well, I think something we'll talk about with Mulholland Drive, but I think there is something about being a movie star that I would not really want to be. I think Ricky Gervais and other people, Ben Affleck, have made the point. If you think you want to be rich and famous, try rich first. And
see if that does it.
If you're rich first, you probably don't need to also be famous.
Yeah, that's the choice you make. Just stick with rich.
Just stick with rich. So we'll that's what we're trying to do here, folks. So great. I had a little update. So I finished my short horror film that I was
Ooh.
directing. And by directing, I mean directing another film, taking that footage and incorporating it into this short horror film. So it's exactly 1 minute long, and it's pretty creepy. It's pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with it. So Andrew hasn't even seen it yet. I'm going to share it with Andrew, but the public will have to wait.
Yep, poor public, always waiting.
But that's actually, we have a question tied in with this. So this is coming from Caroline, who asks, I've been writing for a long time, but I've always been too scared to make my own movies. Do you have any advice for taking the leap from writing on your own to actually making movies? And I think that's a great question, and that's something that's a big step. That's a big thing that a lot of people want to know about. Andrew, any insights, response to that? First off,
Yeah, I think I have a little different. I haven't made as many movies, I guess I would say, but I've made a lot of, edited clips together to form a story, which I guess maybe is a movie. I don't know. I think there's like a difference between I wrote this, I want to make this script, and the script requires other people, resources I don't have immediately at my disposal, versus I have an idea that I could make something, I could get it on my computer, I can edit the footage, I can make something out of that. And that process of just starting something that didn't exist, creating it, editing it, and making it finished, I think is a great place to start, because you have a phone and you can do all of it on a phone. You can film everything on a phone. And I think that's just a great way to get into it, just to get your feet wet of how does this all work, figuring out the processes, the systems, and just finishing something, even if it's not anything anybody really even sees. You can just post it on your social media or nowhere at all if you don't want to. But that process is super easy to get into and start.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And you mentioned having a phone, and I think this is something that a phone. Not the old Nokia ones, if that's what you're still using, if you're, got the burner phones for whatever illicit reasons you have. But if you have any kind of modern smartphone, it's got a great video camera. Sometimes you can adjust the settings to shoot in 1080 or 4K. And that, anyway, there are different things that you could do with a modern camera that are just really good visuals. I was teaching a class this past semester, though, and students had shot things with their phones, and I'm like, okay, great, that's great. But they wanted to then edit them on their phones, and they did. And I was just baffled. I did not know you could do that, and I did not think that was a good approach. I still don't think it's a good approach, but a lot of my students only think of using a phone. They're not even comfortable using a computer.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot. I know Adobe Premiere is on your phone now. So there's just all of these things are coming to the phone. There's a way around it. If you don't want to branch out, you're just I just like my phone. You can do it. Might not be easier,
I just can't imagine. I wouldn't recommend it, but
yeah.
But also, I think to the people who are not identical to me, which some of you listeners must be not identical to me. That's possible. I think it's a really good point that you don't need to do things all in one way. If you're interested in making a film, you don't need to shoot it on film. You don't need to have all this professional stuff. You can do it as easy and casually as you want to. And so don't look at all those hurdles as standing in your way. The thing I would say is that I would encourage people to try making their movies. If you've written a script, try and actually make it, because a script is ultimately kind of a blueprint for a story. It's not really the end product in itself, as opposed to if you're writing a novel or something like that. So I think there is a value, unless you've got people knocking down your doors to buy your scripts already. I would really take your script and actually try to make it, and I think that there is a value in that, and taking that leap, doing what it takes to get that done, because then you have a finished product. Regular people don't really know how to read a script, and they don't know what they're looking at if you give it to them. If you show them a film, they can have an honest response to it, and I think that's really valuable. The thing I would say, though, is just because you're a good writer doesn't necessarily mean that you're a great director. So I don't say that to mean you shouldn't make your films, but I would be trying to find other people to work with. I would be thinking of being fine with not being great at it. On one level, maybe you need to do everything on your own, but just be fine with the fact that you're not going to do it great. If you're working with other people, which I think is wonderful, don't suddenly get all precious about it needs to be done my way. Part of why you're working with these people is because you want to learn from them. You want to work with their ideas and not, well, because I wrote this, I also know how it needs to be directed. Those are two different skills. And I think being open to that is a really good approach to making your script turn into a film in the best way for the script. If you're just looking to boss people around, then you could do that. then
Yeah.
Making a film is a decent way to do that. But it's not necessarily going to yield the best film. So those are just some thoughts I would have to that.
Right. That's a good point with there's different skills. Making a movie requires so many skills. You may be good at some of them, but not all of them. But yeah, just go out and try it and see. You might find you're better at something else than you thought you would be. And who knows? Just got to try it to find out.
Just got to try it to find out. I think that's great advice. And I think just go for it. And I think the more you actually do it, the more you go for it, the better off you're going to be. So thanks for the question, Caroline.
What have you been watching? What have you been watching? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you form opinions about the people who made it?
Okay, now, Andrew, what have you been watching?
We've caught up with the new season of Scrubs, which I didn't even realize came out, but I had recorded it somehow. And if you are familiar with Scrubs, you realize that the last season they did, I think feel like they tried to get new characters in and start a whole new series out of this after JD leaves and Turk leaves, and it's just this new crew, and it didn't quite work. But in this updated version of this season, they have JD back, they have Turk, they have Elliot, they have all the main cores there, except they have new roles now. So they're still at the hospital, it still revolves around them, and then they have the new kids that they're teaching. And I think this works a lot better because it has the same kind of energy and charm of the original Scrubs, the original seasons, because I feel like if you don't have the JD character who is always talking in his, you hear his thoughts in his mind and what he's thinking about any situation, and that perspective of keeping it very light and then also dealing with some more serious things, but it is very much a comedy. I think it played a lot better than I was expecting, and it feels very similar in tone and style to the original seasons of Scrubs. So I was actually really impressed with it. I'm hoping they make more of them. I think they will, because it just turned out way better than I was expecting. I thought this was going to be just a terrible thing, but I liked it a lot. So I'd recommend it.
So fans of the original, you say it
yes.
delivers on that?
I would say so. If you like the original, I think you're going to like it. I really do. Yeah.
Great. What about fans of The Pit? Is it crossover there?
You know what? I think you're going to like it. I really do.
Well, fantastic. I saw another sort of current thing going on, Obsession. I mentioned before I'd seen a film by this director, Curry Barker, and Obsession is just the biggest. I think it was made for $800,000 and has made over $80 million. So that's a good return. Mm-hmm. Have you seen Obsession?
I haven't seen it yet, but you can go ahead and spoil it if you want to.
So it's a horror film, and it's about young people. It's sort of a young guy who he works with a young woman, and he has a crush on her, but he's sort of too timid to make a move. And then he gets a sort of like a crystal at a random shop. He buys this crystal that actually works, and it grants you one wish. But he wishes that she will love him more than anyone else in the world. And then the movie sort of plays with this idea of, what if that's true and it works, but she's now compelled to love him more than anything else in the world, but there's still a part of her that isn't fully on board with that. And what is that? So it's kind of like this just speculative fiction idea of, what would that be like if somebody was suddenly in love with you? And but it's, as opposed to like a crazy romantic comedy, it's like, well, what if she's sort of like in hell as she's being tormented by this love that she doesn't actually feel, but she needs to feel, and it's playing with interesting ideas. I think the film, I'm a little surprised that it's as big a hit as it is. I think it's one of those things that it would not have surprised. I think it's good. I definitely think it's good. I think if people like horror, it's a pretty good one. So I think that's great. I applaud any good movie doing something interesting. I think it's the kind of thing where if it had been made for $800,000 and it came out and made $3 million, I'd be like, yeah, what a successful movie. Mm-hmm. The making $80+ million, whatever, I think is a little bit of the zeitgeist. Like it's of the moment. I'm not quite sure.
Interesting.
But I feel, I would say I'm a millennial, and my parents were baby boomers, and my kids, I guess, are Gen Alpha, as they say, as all the cool kids say. But I actually feel sort of lost thinking about Gen X and Gen Z. Like if they're not my kids and not my parents, these sort of generations like buffeting me, I don't really understand either of them that much. And so I feel like I understand what 10-year-olds are doing right now, and I'll probably understand that generation as they get older better. But the people who are 20 now, I don't quite get their culture.
So you're saying this Obsession feels like a Gen Z movie?
I think it feels like a Gen Z movie. Like, you don't need to be Gen Z to like the movie, but I think it's speaking to certain kinds of relationships, certain kinds of... I think a big part of it is that the main character is... It's playing with this kind of trope of he's the nice guy, but the nice guy who kind of is evil. Not because it's like a hidden evil, but in his niceness, he's kind of evil. So it's I think that's a thing that people didn't used to talk about, but I think that is that kind of complex relationship sort of idea is more of a Gen Z thing, I think. And not that it's not a valuable thing to explore, but I think that speaks especially to young people today. I feel so old, but I guess that would be my take on it.
Yeah, it kind of hit at the right moment in time for this to just blow up. Yeah, I still need to watch. So. I'm gonna have to watch this though.
I think
good.
Also there's an element, because there have been a couple other movies like this, Backrooms. There was another movie, I think. I don't think it's Iron Claw. Someone will have to correct me. I'm not sure.
Iron Claw is the wrestling one.
That's the wrestling one. There was another movie, but basically coming from people with huge YouTube followings, and that have now translated that into feature films. And in years past, people have tried that, and I think partially because of the kinds of content they were making on YouTube, it really didn't translate to feature films very well. But I think there's now a whole group of, I don't know if it's a contiguous group, but I think there are a lot of people creating content on YouTube where those storytelling skills actually translate really well to the feature film. And so I think they're bringing in a huge audience with them.
Right. And horror is so big right now. Like it just
Horror's
hits
always big,
everything comes out.
I think it's definitely, people love a good horror movie.
Yeah.
So, great. All right, so we've got Scrubs and Obsession, a
Little
weird
different
double
vibes.
billing, but I bet I bet there's a lot of overlap in the fan base, though, I would say.
Yeah. Watch Obsession first, then watch Scrubs to help you sleep at night, so you're not scared all night. So
That's right. That's right.
Andrew, have you tried Duncan and Bliss's new upper management flavor?
I have. It didn't make eye contact with me once.
Dark chocolate ice cream so rich and bitter it genuinely believes it's better than you.
It gave me a brain freeze and didn't apologize.
It scheduled a meeting to tell me it tastes good.
It took credit for the caramel swirls, even though the caramel swirls do all the work.
But somehow, you keep coming back.
I desperately want its approval.
Duncan and Bliss upper management. It won't remember your name.
But you'll remember it.
Available now, unless it's in a meeting.
All right, so now let's get into our film of the week, Mulholland Drive. What can you tell us about this, Andrew?
2001, directed by David Lynch. Blonde Betty Elms has only just arrived in Hollywood to become a movie star when she meets an enigmatic brunette with amnesia. Meanwhile, as the two set off to solve the second woman's identity, filmmaker Adam Kesher runs into ominous trouble while casting his latest project. This movie, maybe of all the movies we've done so far, I feel like the description of what it's about just does not do it justice. Like, if you were to describe what this movie is, I feel like that's just a really hard thing to do. To describe this movie, like, what is the plot of this movie? What's the tone of this movie? What is it really about? I think there's just so many ways you could go with this. This is, to me, feels like a very open-ended type of story where it's really up to interpretation in a lot of this, and it's really playing with your expectations of what's real, what's not real, what is dream-like. Because the story does follow. There's a few different storylines coming that start out, but they kind of all merge together at the end, and it is following the Naomi Watts character as she is in Hollywood and is trying to become a big actress and a big star, but this other woman comes into her life with the amnesia, and she just tries to figure out how to help her figure out who she is. And this idea of who am I, where do I fit in the world, that comes up again and again. What is real? What is just a performance? That comes up again and again. And you kind of follow this story as you don't really know where it's going, but at the end, it ties up in a way that you can't really explain. I don't know. I feel like this is an experience more than it is like just describing a story. How did you, describe this? It just feels like a tough ask.
I had watched Mulholland Drive years ago, and now I realize either I was only half paying attention or I just so totally didn't get it, because I remembered so many scenes from it, but I was watching it with totally fresh eyes. So I really liked it. I really liked it. I think it's doing a lot of really interesting things, but I had to then go read up what people say about it, and what people have written about it, what David Lynch has said about it, what Naomi Watts has said about it. And I think it's actually really interesting because I think in some ways it's very surreal, and there are no clear answers, and everything can mean all sorts of things. And David Lynch has said specifically that he didn't want it to just be a one-to-one, here's the exact answer. Mm-hmm. Like, lots of different things could be true. But I've also heard some really compelling, like, basically here's what's happening in the movie that makes a lot of sense. And I think I like that combination, because I feel like with Mulholland Drive, we'll talk more about what's actually going on in the story, but it's a little bit like The Usual Suspects in that these stories are happening, and we then at some point, or maybe throughout, are questioning whether it's true or what's really real. But I think in The Usual Suspects, you come away with a sense of, oh, this was all made up or whatever. Not to spoil
Right.
The Usual Suspects, which but yes, to spoil The Usual Suspects. But it's like, oh, this was all just a story. What's even, what even is this? In Mulholland Drive, I think there's a lot more of, well, maybe both are true, or like it's also, I think with Mulholland Drive, it's so self-aware as a work of cinema that and there are a lot of specific things it's doing on a filmmaking technique level that I think it's engaging with you, the audience, and saying, you're watching this, and this might be a dream, but isn't that also real because you're still watching it? And I think it's very self-aware and really interesting in that way.
Yeah, the idea of what is real and what isn't real doesn't really matter ultimately, like it does like in Usual Suspects. That's the real twist. What was real and what wasn't. But in this, it seems like the idea of playing with reality, what's a dreamlike state, what is she imagining, what is really happening, ultimately it doesn't matter to the story. It's the experience of going through that matters. And whether you think this is real, this really happened, or this really happened, I don't think that ultimately matters to your enjoyment of it or experience either. It seems like it's beyond that. And it's more of this just exploring ideas and themes and messing with your expectations as an audience and trying to involve you in different ways. So I think it just feels like a really, like a skill that David Lynch has that I don't think a lot of people could pull off. Like, I wouldn't know how to make a film like that, to do those things that he's doing in this.
He does some things. So the movie starts with a weird clip or scene of just lots of people swing dancing, which was, if people don't know, that was bizarrely a big trend in the late 90s. It's popular in the 40s and then again in the late 90s, where people got really into swing dancing. The movie Swingers came out. The movie Swing Kids came out. And people just got into this. But so the movie starts with that and never references it again, which is interesting. But I think there's some element of it's setting us up for this to be. Well,
she references the jitterbug, right?
Yes.
Like that's how she got found. Is that the only reference to it? Is it? Oh. I don't know. Is that? There's a lot of things where it's like, is that what it's connecting to? I don't know.
Well, I feel like in this discussion, I'm going to say something,
That's the
and
thing.
then you're going to say like, "Oh, but actually, this happened." There's so much going on.
I don't know.
I don't know. But I think it's serving the purpose of, like, this is a performance. Like, from the beginning, like, you're sort of like off kilter. Like, this is a bizarre way to start a movie, and so you now are prepared for this to be bizarre. There's something weird about this movie, because what a weird way to start a movie. But also, it's from the beginning, it's like, there's something performative. It also sort of starts like, it's not like we're in a realistic scene of watching people swing dance. It's like what you would see in like the intro to an instructional video on swing dancing.
That vibe of everything is what's interesting, especially at the beginning of this movie, where it doesn't quite feel real. It feels like it's like the actors know they're performing, and so they're overdoing it a bit. Like, it feels just a bit exaggerated, almost like a Hallmark movie in a way, where it's like, yeah, we know we're acting and we're playing it a little bigger than we would, just for the camera, which I think is important because it sets up this idea of, at the very beginning, you feel like everybody is putting on a performance for you, and it doesn't feel natural.
There's some really interesting scenes like that with that performative. When the Naomi Watts character, and people use multiple names at different points, but when she arrives in L.A., having met, I guess, on the bus, an elderly couple.
Right.
That whole conversation, it's so weird. It's like the way that they're talking is so kind of like it was scripted. And then also it's just this like, this is the fantasy of arriving in LA. We know you're going to make it. You're going to be so successful. Right. And it's this sort of oh, where are my bags? Oh, no one's stolen them. The cab driver has just taken the initiative to already put them in the trunk. It's just this dream scenario. But there's a scene also when she arrives at her aunt's apartment building. And I thought this was so interesting because she's walking up into the apartment building, and the camera just starts sort of like wiggling around.
Right.
and it's this very and this is, I think, part of this, because it's David Lynch making this, and because there are it's production, the high production values in general. I think if this were just an indie film, you might think, oh, I guess they just messed up there and they had to use the shot. But everything is so intentional here that it's like the camera is sort of weird. I think it's telling us, don't take for granted that this is the truth. Like, there's something weird about this. But it's that really caught me off guard, that kind of camera movement.
Yeah, they do go from that, which something I noticed throughout the film is, you have the Steadicam, these shots that look like they're set up, and then you do move to this handheldness of it, and it just totally takes you out of the feeling of what, like, the movie felt like. I'm in, like, everything's playing out how it should, and then it goes to this handheld, and you're, like, very uneasy about it. That's how it feels, and it's so jarring. But I feel like they do that a lot with these movies, especially with, so you have the camera does that, you have like the tone where it'll be like this really happy, and then all of a sudden it feels like a horror movie. And you're like, wait, how did we get here? This like just sudden switches, even with like the lighting where it's like the soft lighting, you can't really see, and then it just goes dark. And there's a lot of that, like these playing, it feels like it goes back and forth with these, like the extremes. And just kind of messes with how you're feeling at any moment. So you never feel like you can quite settle into this movie. You're always kind of on edge. You're like, I don't know, when's the shoe going to drop next? You're like, where are we going from here? You don't trust anything, which I think was intentional, that feeling, right?
Yeah. So there's one famous scene that is just the craziest scene. But there's a famous scene in Winky's Diner where these two men meet.
Yeah.
And they aren't really characters in the story.
Right.
We don't know who they are. They kind of reappear, but not really in a way that explains who they are. And so I think probably we're to understand that they are part of this dream nightmare scape that's happening. But one character talks about how he's had this nightmare and he's been in this place before and seen these various things happen. And then that starts to happen. And then it comes out to, like, it's this kind of horrifying moment where he said, you were standing over there in my dream, and it was so scary, and then there was a scary man behind the building. And, the other guy is sort of saying that, let's just go check. But in doing that, he gets up and stands exactly where the man had just said, that's where you were standing in my dream. And I think this is really interesting because on a filmmaking technique level, that's an interesting twist. Okay, we've seen this guy sitting at the counter, sitting at the booth, but now he's exactly where the guy described him being. So it's this kind of twist, like, oh, the dream is coming true. But then the film takes its time as they walk out of the diner. They walk to the back.
Yeah,
and it really takes its time, and I think, are expecting that we will see this horrifying man that the guy has talked about in his nightmare, because it's already set us up that the earlier part of the nightmare came true. But when it happens, it's still shocking.
Yes.
And I think that's such an interesting, it's playing with our expectations, but it's like, we know exactly what's going to happen, but it drags it out, and you're thinking, well, if it's dragging it out, is it going to not be real? What's it going to be like? And then it happens, and I just think I think it's masterful playing with the audience's expectations and the audience's awareness of cinematic language and like what it means if we're taking time with a shot, what it means if we're panning over, just those kinds of things. I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah, that scene, maybe of all the scenes, stands out as like, why is this in here? There's some purpose for this scene, but it doesn't seem to fit with the rest of the story that goes on. It kind of comes back at the end of the movie where she is in that diner and she walks it again and he's just in a different spot. But I guess that expectation of the feeling of almost like this dread of like, I'm telling you what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And we're just going to slowly walk towards what's going to happen. And then it happens like I said it would happen. Like there's something about that just doesn't feel right. Like it doesn't fit in like movie language. That isn't how things work. you're gonna somehow something is gonna go not according to plan, or it's gonna be different than you expect. But then to just switch it and say, no, it's exactly as we said it was gonna happen. That's a way of like messing with your expectations, even though it doesn't seem like it should be. So yeah, it's very creative the way that he did that.
I thought that was so interesting. And then I don't know if this was intentional or everything is intentional, I think, in this. But
Yeah.
I don't know if this was an intentional commentary or mirror of that. But there's a scene where the two women are scouting out this apartment that maybe belongs to one of them. They're trying to figure out her identity, so they're going to look for this apartment. And they think, oh, maybe this is hers. They see these people coming out of the building, and they're scared of the men standing there. They're not quite sure what they're doing there. But they poke their heads above the shrubs, and they sort of like gasp. And I was expecting we're going to cut to what they're seeing, and we also are going to be shocked. Mm-hmm. Because like we're setting up, oh, something scary is happening. They're shocked. There's all this tension, and they're looking up. We're going to cut to what they're seeing, and we, the audience, are going to be surprised. But instead, it cuts to a different angle of them looking over the shrubs, and then just a calm reveal of what they're seeing.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know if that was intentionally messing with us, but to me, I was like preparing for another jump scare, and then it didn't happen. And so I'm inclined to think that this is all intentional, and that Lynch is really playing with our expectations throughout the movie.
Yeah. That's another good example of that. Like he knows what you do expect. He knows the language of film so well that at any moment he can just change things up slightly, and it just gives you this whole sense of like very uneasy, I don't know what's going on here. It just isn't following the normal pattern. The way that he cuts, that edits, the way that the lines are said, I feel like even the way that they cut between scenes, there's oftentimes just a jarring, like, why would you cut the middle of this scene, go to that, and then come back to this? It just doesn't feel, none of it feels natural. But again, natural is just based on what we usually see in a movie. What we've come to understand as the natural sequence of events, how a movie plays out. And he seems to be, almost at every opportunity, intentionally giving us something else to think about, giving us a different way of doing it, which is part of the, I think, appeal of this film.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's so much interesting stuff going on a sort of cinematic language kind of level. But what about just the story itself? Do you think... I mean, and I think the story itself works on multiple layers. So, but on a simple level, do you think this story keeps your attention, feels like it's going somewhere? Or is it so trippy that, like, you really need to think about it and it's not a fun watch? Like, where do you fall on that?
I do think it's a fun watch. This is my second time watching it, and I think I enjoyed it more this time than I did the first time. Or at least, I feel like I understood it more than the first time. I do think there's a sense of, just because of how he messes with the language of film, that it's engaging even if you don't quite know what's going on. And I do think you don't know what's going on for most of the movie. You're just kind of like, is this evidence? Is this something that means something? Is this reveal like going to come back? How does this all connect together? In the back of your mind, you always have that, which keeps you wanting to figure out more. But as a story, I think it's really hard to like even say what the story is afterwards, even though you kind of, I don't know that it matters as much, because it is really engaging without having a clear, this is what we want, this is how we're going to get it. I know we're getting closer to the goal or farther away from the goal. I don't know that you ever really feel like I'm getting closer or further away. It's kind of just always moving and changing. But as a story goes, I guess I would say a little harder to get into, but the visual language of it all does a lot of that, especially early on, of keeping you engaged. By the end, I don't think you need it as much. You're really into it.
Yeah, I think, and this is what I want to, I think watching the film with the idea that it's a little surreal, that it's a little dreamscapey, I think it's helpful, because I think if you watch this expecting it to be a straightforward movie, you're going to get annoyed and confused by all the inconsistencies and the weirdness of it. I think if you're expecting it to be bizarre, it's actually surprisingly straightforward. Or
Yeah.
there's a version of the story that is surprisingly straightforward. And so I think the film actually, on one level, at least for a lot of the screen time, it starts off with a great premise. This woman, she's in a limo for some reason. People try to murder her, assassinate her, like some kind of it looks like a
An
really
attempted
intentional hit.
something, yeah.
And then there's a car accident that gets in the way of it. That's a great premise. I mean, you could see so many just crime movies from the 90s
Right.
being based just on that premise, just a straight ahead movie like that. And so I think that right from the get-go feels like, okay, here's a story. Then you also have the person that she's connecting with is this new actress trying to make it in Hollywood. And you have this subplot of the director. I think all of those sort of make sense as, you could see that storyline being any number of, 90s crime action thriller movies. I think that could totally work. And so I think it's valuable that it does hook you in with a story that makes sense before it then spins out in ways that don't really make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, the beginning of... it feels like he's setting up a straightforward story in a way, and then it just does not go how any other director would go with this story. With that setup, you just wouldn't go the way that he goes with it. And so that's just so hard to grasp, where this doesn't all make sense together. So there's a sense of you just kind of have to go with it and trust that it's going to lead somewhere. I don't think that's a hard ask unless you're expecting a straight story. But if you go in knowing this is David Lynch, like you said, I don't think it's a hard ask. I think it's actually pretty engaging the whole time if you're just a little open-minded.
I wanted to ask, does the term Mulholland Drive mean much to you? When you think of the term Mulholland Drive, what do you think of?
I only think of this movie. I have no other connection to it.
I mean, because it's, having lived in L.A., Mulholland Drive is it's a major road in L.A., but it's kind of a windy road, up above the city. So it's kind of, it's not the main road that you take, that you take to get places. It's more we're going to go on a nice drive. We're going to get up above things. It's going to be windy and long.
Okay.
And so I think it's interesting. Mulholland Drive, when she escapes the hit and the accident, she sort of stumbles out and she reaches up and we see that she's on Sunset Boulevard now, which is another major street in Los Angeles. But I think that's an intentional. I have to imagine that's an intentional play on the film Sunset Boulevard, and we're also looking at. It's setting us up. This is going to be part of the storyline. Is a play on the storyline of Sunset Boulevard, and I think I would have to imagine that you're naming the film Mulholland Drive in response to the name Sunset Boulevard. It's this other major street in Los Angeles that people know, but it's saying we're taking a different approach to this kind of Hollywood story.
That's a good way to think of it, of a windy road. This feels like a windy story where you're kind of getting above things. It's not straightforward in any way. But when you say Sunset Boulevard, I know what Sunset Boulevard is. I know the movie, and I know that name. That's a street in LA. Everybody, I feel like that's much more common than Mulholland Drive, which I had never heard of before this movie, having not lived in LA. So that kind of makes sense that he's just playing again. And even these little details, he seems to be playing with your expectations or what's going to come forward. He is showing his cards, but you just don't know what they mean yet.
Yeah. So there's one whole sequence that I thought was so interesting, which is the director meeting with, and I don't know who all is supposed to be in the room. I guess it's his agent, it's somebody from the studio, and then it's these other
Ominous
mafia
guys.
financiers or something. But I thought, so on one level, I thought it was just a really fun commentary on Hollywood. And I think a lot of this movie is both Lynch saying, I'm going to make a trippy movie about reality and dreams and human depravity and whatever, but I'm going to set it in Hollywood. But also I think it's very specifically a commentary and making jokes about Hollywood, and it's kind of like a darker version of La La Land, predating La La Land, but it's kind of a darker version of that, where it's these are the dreams people come with, and here are the different scenarios you get in. But I thought this scene where the director literally goes and destroys the car of these mafia guys because he's so upset about how the movie goes, or how the meeting about the movie goes. And I thought, that is the ego of that's like the stereotypical ego of a Hollywood director, is that I don't care that these are mafia guys, I'm going to go smash up their car because I am the director.
And he just happens to have a golf club that he brought in with him, which is also just a weird, like, why would he has a golf club in the meeting, and you're like, why? And then afterwards he uses it to destroy the car, and then when he goes home he puts it in his golf bag. But that whole situation just seems a little too extreme. It seems a little more than what you would normally expect. And then you're like, okay, are they in the mafia? It turns out they really are, and they just took all of his money just like that. Like, in an instant he has no money. How does that actually happen in reality? There's a lot of those things that seem really played up, but it's a really fun thing to watch as it's happening, because it just, you as a you've seen movies before, you don't think it's going to go that way. It just doesn't happen. Like, it happens exactly as they said it would. Like, this is the mafia. If you don't do this, you're going to be in trouble. This is, and then all these things just happen, like, in an instant. And that sense of just like heightened reality is what it seems like. It's just, no one would actually do that, but then they do it in a movie. That scene I think is really interesting. And then the other scene of the like hitman, also just very jarring. Before that, where he's in the office and he kills somebody just out of nowhere, and then there's two other people who hear it. Like, he accidentally shoots the person in the next room. He's got to take care of her. Somebody sees that. He's got to take care of that guy. Very much like a comedy, but also like, what's going on? This just is a little more heightened. But that whole sense, and also the cowboy, that first half of the movie, it does feel like everything is just a little heightened, a little more than normal. And you don't know if it's funny, if it's scary, what are you supposed to be feeling? But yeah, that idea, I don't know.
I think there's so much going on. And I want to, in a second, talk about what we think is actually happening here. But I took the hitman, because we have a couple different hitmen in this. We have the hitman who tried to kill the woman in the beginning and then died in the car accident, basically.
Yep.
We have the cowboy who comes, and I love that line, if you do good, you'll see me one more time. If you do bad, you'll see me two more times. That's like, oh, that's a good...
That's such a good line.
That's a good, ominous line. But and then we have this other guy who we actually see doing killing. And I think, I guess my take on it is that these other hitmen are kind of the fictional dream version of hitmen. So professional, so creepy, and that this guy in the office is an actual hitman, and everything goes wrong. It's not it's not going to be clean and professional. It's going to be a mess and a disaster, because that's like the reality of life. And I did think, I've been in a lot of, I feel like if you watch the show Entourage, you see like these gleaming office buildings in LA, and that's one kind of LA office building. But I've been in a lot of office buildings like the one where the hitman kills people.
Yeah.
Where
Not
it's
nice.
just like, it's like this is an office, it hasn't been updated since the 30s, and it's just like these little, like a production company will rent an office for 3 months and then shut down, and it's just like, it's a weird, creepy kind of dirty vibe, but that's the reality of it. That was but I think Lynch is having fun. I think that's one thing about Mulholland Drive. It's got some horror to it. It's creepy. It's got some romance. But I think there's a lot of like jokes and fun happening too. That like Lynch is just like having some fun with this.
Yeah, just the tone, the genre, it just seems to change, and just whatever he feels like, this would be a fun twist right now. But that hitman scene is just better if it's funny. Like, it's just such a memorable scene.
It kind of felt like a Coen Brothers kind of scene.
Yeah.
But so, what do we think is actually happening? So I have kind of a theory based on what other people have said that kind of makes sense to me. And I know David Lynch has said, I don't want to say exactly what's happening because I think it can all be true. I don't want to just say there's one truth to what's actually happening.
That's
But
good.
a lot of people have said it's not. You really can kind of draw a through line of what's going on because there are some clues. Like there's a scene where the cowboy comes into the room where they've found a dead body, and he says, like, "Time to wake up, girl," or something like that. And then the Naomi Watts character wakes up as that girl. And I think that's, like, a pretty compelling point
The through line.
A lot of this has been a dream.
The blue key is a through line. There's a lot of that of, is she here or not? So the way, I guess this is my second time seeing it, so I have a different understanding than the first time. Based on this viewing, I feel like the first half-ish of the movie is the dream of the Naomi Watts character, how she's like envisioning her life, or like her idealized version of life. She's giving everybody, all these characters, which are in the second act, like the second half of the movie as well, she gives them these more altruistic motives and reasons. She makes them the type of people that she would want them to be. And because of that, she then gets this life that she wants to have. Like she is on the way to become a movie star, but then, you know, it doesn't quite get there. But I do feel like that's the part that she's imagining. All these people, the Rita character that she's in love with, and just kind of represents this idea of, I want what she has. She is everything. And I think that representation of the Rita character of, this is what I want in my life, and what she represents is what I want, and just I'm in love with that. And then as she goes away, in the second half, it's just the Naomi Watts character, and you realize, oh, she lives in a dump. Her life actually is really bad, and she's involved in all of these shady deals. The hitman is she hired to kill the Rita character, who she envies because she's the movie star, and Naomi Watts' character is not the movie star. I feel like that's maybe how I'm seeing it. Like the first half is idealized dreamlike state, the second half is the reality, and then how do they connect? But you know, I could be wrong on that.
I mean, I think, that's basically my take, and I think that's what a lot of people kind of settle on. I think a lot of questions come up in the details of then, like
How
what
does it
exactly
connect
translates over. Like, I'm not clear. There are a couple things I'm not clear on. Like, the romance between Naomi Watts and Rita was there a woman that she was having a relationship with in reality, or is that all just some kind of splintered self in her dream?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure, because that's a big part of the story, but I don't know that was actually, was there a sexual romantic relationship in real life at all, or were those two parts of her personality and that's just the way it was being expressed in the dream?
And does Naomi Watts actually love her, like in love with her as a person, or is she in love with what she represents, like the movie star? I guess it would work on multiple levels, though, and maybe that's intentional.
The other question I had, so there's really a third woman who is the woman who auditions for the director.
Yeah.
There's this whole thing of the mafia is insisting that he cast this woman, and he doesn't want to, but they insist they're going to shut everything down, they're going to kill him, they're going to do everything if he doesn't cast her. And that seems to be like, that's the kind of thing that you could imagine happening certainly in a movie, maybe in real life. But I think what that is Naomi Watts saying, the only reason he cast her instead of me is because this, like, over-the-top mafia world forced him to. And so when we're seeing all those mafia scenes, that's her vision of how creepy and crazy the mafia must have been to force him to cast her.
The Camilla Rhodes is the name of the actress,
But is that the same person as Rita? Is there only... So
right.
we see her audition, and I thought it was interesting because she auditions, and she's good. Like she does this sort of musical performance, and it was interesting because it was like in the movie Nashville, the woman finally gets the chance to sing, and she just bombs and does a terrible job. But here, like, she's good, she's attractive, she sings well, and so I think that's an interesting moment because you kind of expect, like, if the mafia is forcing him to cast her, that she would then be terrible. But no, she seems perfectly good. But is that a different person, or is that the same person as Rita, but that's what she looks like in real life, and Betty is imagining her as Rita in her dream?
That isn't clear to me either. Why they would have 3 of them? Because I thought it'd be interesting if that Camilla Rhodes character was played by Rita, just dressed up differently. The actress who plays Rita, but they don't do that. It's a totally separate actress. Looks different.
Totally separate actress, and in fact, we see them
Very
talk
confusing
to each
at
other
first.
at one point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and
when
it's
the
just like a
director
confusing
is
thing.
at dinner, he's talking about the Rita character and calling her Camila.
Yeah. And then it's even more confusing. I think I'm assuming that's intentional, that you are supposed to be confused because in Naomi Watts' mind, it's all the same thing. Or she doesn't quite know what's going on. Or the story she made up about how this could happen. Like you said, in her mind, the only logical way that she's not a movie star is because the mafia got involved. Right? And all these crazy things happen. That's how she thinks this is. Otherwise, she would be a movie star, but it's just these unnatural things that are happening around her. She has really bad luck, and she explains it all. But yeah, like you said, like, seems like a great actress. You could understand why she's a star. I don't know. I don't know how you explain it away, though. Like, to explain it like this is the right or wrong, this is exactly how it happened. I don't see how they do that. It just seems a little bit of like the loose ends don't quite match up. I can't quite tie it in a perfect knot to just end it perfectly on that.
And I think I agree. I'm not quite sure, and maybe if I watched it a few more times, I would have stronger opinions about, okay, I do see now that they talked then, or he says this.
Yeah.
But I think that there is a lot that's intentionally very loose-endy.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately this story is not as much about Naomi Watts as a character. I mean, I think there's some level of she's jealous, but then she's also racked with guilt, maybe, and that's part of why in her dream she wants to help this character that she tried to kill, and I'm not even sure what actually happened in the reality. But I think that the story isn't as concerned about who done it. Kind of let's follow the plot. It gives us enough plot to sink our teeth into, but it's then a bigger story about dreams and reality and the whole setting of the Hollywood system and how people destroy themselves and things like that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be concerned with tying up the loose ends. It's just like, if there's loose ends, that's fine. We don't have to tie everything up. That's not the primary goal of this movie. Even though there is, like you said, there's enough of a story, but you're not going to get, I don't feel like, a really satisfying ending where you're like, it all came together in the end, now it all makes sense. That's just not how it ends.
Right. I think it's a really good movie. It made me think of a couple dream movies that came after. So, like, Inception is a movie about dreams, but it's not really. It's a James Bond movie, really. Yeah. It's a cool sci-fi James Bond movie because it's like, yes, you can, have the city turn up on its side in a dream. I guess you could. But more often, that's not the way that people dream, and people aren't usually having Snow Fortress dreams all the time. Right. I don't think
it's much more of a straight story, though.
Yeah,
that Inception at the end,
you're
like, okay, it all makes sense. He tied up, every loose end is tied up. This all makes sense. Yeah,
yeah. And I love Inception. Inception, but I think it's a different kind of story, and I don't really think it's as much about dreams as it purports to be.
The dreams is kind of just the way in.
Beau is Afraid. Did you see that one?
I don't think I saw Beau was Afraid, no.
By Ari Aster. And that one, I think, is very similar to Mulholland Drive very different story that it's telling, but I think in the way that, and I think it's a little bit more explicitly in this kind of, it's so absurd in the way that it tells the story that it I don't think it's playing with reality as much as it is really just you're in a dream, and the dream, here's this crazy nightmare that's happening, and now I switch gears and I'm in a totally different setting, and this is what's happening.
Okay.
And I think that kind of like flow that happens in dreams is it's an interesting thing. But I did think that Mulholland Drive, I think it's really interesting how it explores that kind of like what is reality and what is how does that play into our dreams, and how does that then connect to film as a art form?
Right, because it does seem like he is using dreams or dreamlike scenarios. That's not, it can't all be real, right? Like at the end of the movie, you know for certain, not everything we saw can be real. It wouldn't match up right. So there is an element of him saying, you decide for yourself. And I think that's interesting to, when you know for sure that it is playing with those ideas, like in other movies that have done this. I was also thinking of like, I'm thinking of ending things. Just Charlie Kaufman in general. I feel like he plays with those ideas. There was also a French movie. It's not playing with dreams. I think it's called He Loves Me, He Loves Me Not, where the first half is, it's her version of this romance, and then the second half is his version of the romance, and she comes across as a stalker. But in the first half, it's very romantic played out. So like these two different ideas of like how someone sees it versus how the other person sees it, which I think they're kind of playing with this as well. How Naomi Watts' character sees reality versus what is actually reality. So there's a lot of movies that do that. I don't think any movies do it quite to this extent, though. This does, like, to me, this really stands out as like a one of one of, I can't think of a movie that I would say is similar to this movie.
No, not really. I think this is, so let's come down on, great work of cinema or not. I think this movie really is unique in the way that it tells its story, in the way that it explores cinematic language. And I really like that it is experimental and pushing the edges, pushing the envelope while still telling. I think it's treading such a fine line, but really succeeding at it, of a pretty coherent storyline with a lot of absurd loose ends, or surreal loose ends. And I think if it was just too surreal, it would be hard to like as much. But I think this is really treading that line well.
Yeah, the surreal elements of it. I guess, have you seen many of his other films? I watched Eraserhead.
Uh-huh.
And that one feels way more surreal. Like, it's from the very beginning, the very get-go, you're like, this is very surreal, and it stays in that area the whole time. Whereas Mulholland Drive, you get surreal elements, but it does feel like it's coming back to be a little more accessible to the average person. Like, it does feel like a good mix of all of the elements that make David Lynch what he is, put into a film. And so maybe that's why this is his most famous film. I feel like this is the one people talk about the most, at least. And I do think this is just a great work of cinema. I think watching it again, I like it more, and I'm recognizing more. I feel like as you continue, like, this is very rewatchable in the sense that if you watch it again, you're gonna, like, it's rewarding. It's gonna reward watching it again because there's so much in it. There's so much depth to this, and there's so much that he's set up in this that you wouldn't see on the first viewing or probably the second viewing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Mulholland Drive is a great film. It's not, I mean, it has some scary moments, but it's not like graphically violent. But it's scary. It's scary and creepy. So maybe that's even more, some people would just be turned off by that. But I think it's a really good film, and I think it's an important film just in the sense of how much it's saying and reflecting about cinema. And so I would say it belongs, in the canon, as a sort of great work of cinema.
How would you remake it if you had to? If the studios backed the truck up and paid you, what would you do?
So if we were going to do a family-friendly version of Mulholland Drive, how would you approach that?
When you think of family-friendly version, not only does it need to be, like rated PG or less, but it also needs to be like a story that families can get behind, even kids, which this is not. I don't think a kid would watch this movie and understand anything that's going on, really. Most people, I think, would have a hard time with this. So in order to make this family-friendly, I think you got to change the way that the story plays out and make it way more straightforward, which I was going to say doesn't feel like a David Lynch thing, but he did make one movie called The Straight Story that was a very straightforward, family-friendly film, which is very good. So I think he could do it, but I think the idea of the story of having somebody come to Hollywood, and they have these big dreams, and then there's another actress who has what she wants, and then she it's almost like an All About Eve situation where she kind of befriends her. I feel like that's maybe the path that you're going down in this, but have a happy ending to where she befriends her, and maybe she gets jealous, and maybe she, wants to start some rumors about her and try to end her career, but then actually apologizes, comes around, says, I learned a lot, and then she gets a part in a role. And at the end, they are both in the movie together. Maybe there's a musical number or something. But I think that's the straightforward version of this story. Definitely not what this movie is about, though.
Yeah, I think this is a tough one. I think there could be a family-friendly version of this, but I don't think it would be serving the same purpose. Just more tractors, right? Isn't that a straight story?
Yeah, that's what it is. The tractors.
But I guess I was thinking slightly different, but if we took like a girl, and I like the idea of if she's helping a new friend solve some kind of mystery. Like there's something like, not amnesia, because it doesn't seem like that would be her place to, but like, something got lost. I lost something and I need help finding it. And we go on this journey where we're exploring the school, we're exploring this city or something, and we're going on this journey finding all these interesting details. Maybe it's the city of Los Angeles and they're exploring, and so it's tying in that way. But she's helping this new friend, and we kind of discover eventually it's actually an imaginary friend. But by going on this journey, the girl has been learning and growing this self-confidence for herself that she needed to see, like, I was too timid to do these things on my own, but when I started doing them to help my imaginary friend, then I had the courage to go do them. And that's different from Mulholland Drive, but playing with the idea of I'm kind of imagining this scenario or dreaming this scenario where I'm helping this person. I wouldn't say that the girl needs to have tried to kill somebody, but I like that idea maybe of like using the imaginary, you're helping an imaginary friend, but actually that's a way of you growing yourself. The movie Tilly, I forget
Never
who
heard
was
of it.
in that, but it's about like a mom struggling postpartum kind of, and or maybe early childhood anyway, but she's a mom who's struggling, and she kind of has this woman come and help her, and it turns out it's an imaginary friend. Spoiler warning for Tilly. But I think that kind of idea is I'm just stealing for this family-friendly version.
There we go.
Okay, what about a no-budget version, though?
Yeah, trying to think of a way, how do we limit locations for this and just really cut this down? I was thinking if you wanted to just slim it down a little bit, you keep the Naomi Watts, the Betty and Rita dynamic going. You could probably cut the diner scenes. You could probably cut the movie director, that whole storyline that takes place out of that out of like where they're at. They don't really connect until the end anyway. You could probably take that out, and if you just had the Betty and Rita in the apartment at the beginning, and then that other location where the house, they go in to check on the house of who's living there. At the end of the film, Naomi Watts ends up being the one that lives there. If you just had those two locations, and you kind of kept the, Naomi Watts walks in, there's this girl with amnesia, doesn't remember anything. We don't have to see the backstory necessarily. She can just kind of say, I don't remember who I am. I think there's maybe enough there to just have a really interesting story that keeps a similar vibe to this. Obviously wouldn't be the same, but I don't know that it'd be that much, like, you'd be cutting out a lot, but I think you could get the sense of this movie. Like, keep it the same kind of tone and have the mystery and play with your expectations in a similar way if you just had those two locations, maybe.
Yeah, I think this movie actually, I think what makes this movie special could be done on a low budget. Like, I think that certain Hollywood aspects of it, some of the director stuff, actually showing the filming and auditions and stuff, that, the fancy dinner, that would be more expensive. But a lot of what's at the core of this is a very small story. And so I basically agree with what you were saying, but I was thinking of that office building where the hitman kills the three people. I'm like, I like, what if, I don't know, like what if that office building was more of a part of the, like, I don't know, that setting is so kind of like, I don't feel like that's been explored that much, that kind of building. And I think you could have, in this office, this is happening. In this office, this is happening. In terms of, the director's having this meeting in here. The hitman is doing this over here. Some of the scenes between, the casting that Naomi Watts does, that whole scene could be happening in the same building. I think basically you could just strip down a lot of the different locations. It doesn't need to be that building, but I think you focus in on those relationships, and I think you could really tell this kind of story on a super low budget. But that reminds me, I wanted to say about that casting scene. I think that scene alone might be responsible for a lot of Naomi Watts' career. And I think this is such an interesting thing in movies where if you give an actor a chance to show a ton of range in your movie, that, like, Naomi Watts is playing a character in that scene, but we still see her as an actress play that character that's totally different from the character we've seen her play.
Yep.
And even that character that we've seen her play has multiple different versions of that character. I just think this is it's an acting tour de force by Naomi Watts.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also so well written to give her the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is set up for her to just go all in. And she just comes out the star of this, which is interesting because in the movie she's not the star. But
right.
Naomi Watts is the star of this movie, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's, I don't know if you've heard of this movie, but Good Will Hunting, I think, is a film that
great movie.
Was written by two actors. And I think that also is one where, if you think about it, that was just, why write a movie for you to star in that isn't going to show your range? And I think the idea of, I'm having fun with my friends, I'm being tough, I'm being sensitive, I'm being, like, the kind of different kinds of acting performances that they wrote into those scenes. I think if you're writing a movie for yourself to act in, you should be sure to write scenes that get to show off your range.
Yeah. Every actor loves a good scene where they have a monologue of some kind, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody loves a good monologue.
Everybody loves a good monologue. Okay, but that brings us to the TV version of this. And I should say, apparently, David Lynch wrote this originally to be a TV series, and then that was nixed by the studio, and so he had to rewrite it to turn it into a film.
Right.
But, whether you want to take that into account or not, how would you convert this into a TV series?
Well, I was taking that into account, but I just cannot wrap my mind around, like, how would this have been a TV show? This seems to me like so much of a movie that I'm like, what could he possibly have pitched for this story? Maybe it was a lot more open-ended. I think if you were to do a TV show, you would need to, all these side characters that don't have much of like a background to them, you could give, there's so many interesting characters, I think is what I'm saying is, you could learn a lot more about like, who are these mysterious men that show up when the director pitches his movie, right? Who's the hitman guy? What's the deal with the cowboy? Where does he come from? I'd like more of his backstory. The director, I think, could use a lot more time. That whole situation between his wife, who she's cheating on him with Billy Ray Cyrus, like that seems like a whole episode as well. And then the Naomi Watts and the Rita, it feels like that's explored really well in this, that whole dynamic. But you could just go more slow with it or slower with it and kind of just reveal things at a slower pace. If it was a TV show, I don't know that it has necessarily an ending like this movie does, though. I wonder if it keeps going open-ended. Maybe you would need it to be more open-ended, but I think David Lynch does a really good job with keeping things that way. So, I don't know, something around that. I just have a hard time picturing this as anything but a movie, though.
Have you seen Twin Peaks?
No.
Neither have I. I feel like we got to see
that might help.
Twin Peaks because that is a David Lynch TV show. So
right.
I feel very uninformed on David Lynch specifically just by having not seen Twin Peaks. So I feel like that would be helpful in talking about a TV show from David Lynch. But I think my understanding is that the wrap up with like she wakes up, or like the idea that it kind of reveals that it was a dream, I don't think would have been part of the TV pilot. And
Okay.
and I'm not sure if that's confirmed, but I think that was my understanding. But then I think the question is, do we just live in this dream world for a whole series of a show, or are we going back and forth between dreams and reality? I don't know. I think it would be interesting to follow these different characters, but it's a real question of if we're in a dream world. I think their names are Dan and Herb, the guys at Winkies in the beginning with that sort of horrifying scene. Like, should they have bigger roles in the series, or is the whole point of them that they basically exist for one scene? And I don't know. It's a weird. I also feel like the idea that this is a dream, it doesn't come at the very end of the movie, which I think would be a bit of a cheat. It comes sort of 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah.
And it's not even 100% confirmed that that's what's going on, but to the extent that it is a dream, that reveal comes not right at the end. And I think it would feel like it was cheating if it came right at the end. And I think if you put that reveal at the end of the series, that would feel like it was cheating. So I kind of feel like you would need to establish within the pilot that we are playing with reality and that this is kind of a dreamscape. It's a tricky one. I mean, I think I like the world that we're living in, and I'd like to see more of that. But I think either you're doing something with every episode, it's clearly a dream, and there's some kind of connection between here are the real things that are happening in the world, and here's the person having the dream and how that's playing out. Kind of a Law and Order kind of setting where we've got the reality and the dream, or vice versa, but we sort of have this bifurcated episode. Or we're just living in the world of the dream, and it's just this kind of surreal LA, and we never establish at the end that it was all a dream. It's just people are left to wonder what was going on the whole time in that universe. I think those would be I just think if you say at the end it was a dream, I think that would ruin it. So I think you have to either say it earlier or not at all.
Because if you, like in the movie, like once you go from we're not in the dream anymore, you don't go back. Like that's really hard to do of just saying we've left the dream world and now we've moved on. So you have to do that every episode to set up the pattern. Or do you do like the first 4 episodes, but then it seems like you can't go back to the dream world once you left it? It seems tricky. I don't know. I would be really interested to see what the pilot was.
Well, now I need to go see Twin Peaks because I think
maybe that's
the
where we need to go.
We'll get to it.
Yeah.
All right. Would any of those be an improvement on the film?
I don't think so. I don't think so. No.
Maybe David Lynch's TV version of it, but I don't think ours would.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, we can't wrap our minds around that.
Nope. So, final verdict. Would you recommend Mulholland Drive?
I'd recommend it. I'm trying to think of like people in my life I would recommend this movie to, and that would be tough. I don't know of many people, but if you like movies, I don't know how you could skip this one. I feel like this is just like an essential film to watch if you're going to like understand films in general, film history, like what things are based on. If you're looking to see some of the great films, this is in it. You have to see it. Yeah.
That's a really good point. I would say it's hard to recommend it as a light, fun watch.
Yeah.
But if you want some homework, this is going to be some of the most enjoyable homework you've done.
Yeah.
That's how I would put it. I guess it's kind of
It's not for the casual
hard to watch
viewer.
just casually. You have to invest a little in it, but I think it really pays off. There you have it. Thanks for joining us on How to Make Films and Influence People. Check us out at howtomakefilmspodcast.com, and we'll see you next time.